My name is Elena Vasquez, and I was 36 when I learned that the money I had been told was gone had been sitting in a vault with my name on it the whole time. I was 36 when I stood in a lawyer's office and watched my aunt's face collapse because she had just discovered that the inheritance she had been spending for 17 years was never hers to spend. The lawyer's office was on the 19th floor of a building I had never entered before. The building was glass and steel. It had a lobby with a fountain that made a sound like rain. I had taken the elevator up. I had pressed the button for 19. I had watched the numbers change. I had not known what I was walking into. I had only known that a man named Mr. Okonkwo had called me twice and left a message saying it was urgent. I grew up in a house where money was a wound that never healed. My parents died when I was 19. They died in a car accident on a highway that had no shoulder. I was in college. I was studying accounting. I was the first person in my family to go to university. I was the one who was supposed to escape. Visual, a highway. A guardrail with a dent in it. A single shoe on the asphalt. Rain on the windshield of a stopped car. I lost on the outside. When my parents died, I was told there was no estate. I was told the house had been mortgaged. I was told the life insurance had lapsed. I was told that my parents had left nothing but debt. My Aunt Marta told me this. She sat me down in my parents' living room. She held my hand. Nay, my cat, you hold. Me. She said, Elena, you have to understand. There's nothing left for you. Meow. Down. Me. Not day and yard. No, be. I was 19. I had no reason to doubt her. My parents had never talked about money. They had never talked about savings or investments or wills. They had talked about working hard and staying out of debt. They had talked about making do. I had watched my mother clip coupons. I had watched my father fix the car with parts from a junkyard. I had assumed that they were poor. I had assumed that there was nothing. I finished college. I worked 3 jobs. I paid my tuition with scholarships and loans, and the $78 a week I earned at a copy shop. I graduated with $42,000 in student debt. I paid it off in 7 years. I paid it off by working nights and weekends. I paid it off by living in a studio apartment that had a radiator that made a sound like a dying animal. I paid it off because I had been told there was no other money. Once, Joel, I had been told there was no inheritance. I had been told that my parents had left me nothing. My Aunt Marta was the one who had managed my parents' affairs after the accident. She had been the executor of the estate. Oxy. She had told me the house needed to be sold. She had told me the proceeds would cover the funeral and the outstanding debt. She had told me there was nothing left of her. I had signed papers. I had signed them at the kitchen table of her house. I had signed them without reading them carefully because I was 19 years old and I was grieving and I trusted her. 17 years. 17 years. I had been working. 17 years I had been paying off debts that were supposed to be settled. 17 years I had been told that my parents had left me nothing. And 17 years my aunt had been living in a house that my grandfather had bought and paid for in cash. The call from Mr. Okonkwo came on a Tuesday. I was at my desk. I was working for a small accounting firm. I had been there for 9 years. I was a senior accountant. I was the person who found errors in other people's spreadsheets. I was the person who reconciled the accounts that no one else could untangle. I was the person who understood. I had been understanding for 17 years. Visual, a desk, a computer screen with a spreadsheet open, a phone with a blinking voicemail indicator, a coffee mug that says world's okayest accountant. Mr. Okonkwo's message was brief. He said he was an attorney representing the estate of my maternal grandfather. He said there was a matter that required my attention. He said it was time-sensitive and young. He did not mention money. He did not mention an inheritance. He said the word estate, and I felt a cold spot open in my chest. I called him back. I called him from my desk. I used my work phone. I did not know why. I think I wanted there to be a record. He told me that my grandfather had established in 1988. He told me the trust had been funded with $200,000. He told me the trust was intended for the education and welfare of my grandfather's grandchildren. He told me my parents had been the trustees. He told me that when my parents died, the trusteeship had passed to my Aunt Marta. He told me that my Aunt Marta had been managing the trust for 17 years. He told me she had not been managing it correctly. I asked him what that meant. He said, "Your aunt has been using the trust as her personal bank account." That was the first time I heard the facts without the filter of family loyalty. Mr. Okonkwo was not my uncle. He was not my cousin. He was a stranger with a measured voice and a desk in a glass building. He said the words like they were ordinary. He said them like they were numbers on a balance sheet. He said them like he had said them 100 times before. He told me the trust had originally held $200,000. He told me the principal had been invested, not Famio, Kenyano. He told me the investments had grown. He told me the trust was now worth $438,000. He told me that my aunt had withdrawn $93,000 for a home renovation. He told me she had withdrawn $47,000 for a car. He told me she had withdrawn $22,000 for a vacation. He told me she had withdrawn $12,000 for a wedding. He told me none of those withdrawals were authorized by the trust's terms. He told me the trust was supposed to have been distributed to the grandchildren when they reached the age of 25. He told me I was 36. He told me my cousin Sophia was 34. He told me my cousin Diego was 31. He told me none of us had ever received a distribution. I did not cry. I did not yell. I sat at my desk. I sat at my desk and I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen. The spreadsheet had numbers. The numbers were not my numbers. The numbers were someone else's. I looked at them, and I did not see them. I saw a kitchen table. I saw my aunt holding my hand. I saw her telling me there was nothing. I saw 17 years of working 3 jobs and paying off loans and believing that my parents had left me nothing. I said, "What happens now?" Mr. Okonkwo said, "The trust has a provision. If a trustee engages in material misappropriation, the beneficiaries can petition to have the trustee removed. The trust can be frozen. The assets can be recovered. There is a clause. He told me the clause was in the original trust document. He told me it had been written by a lawyer who had anticipated the possibility of bad faith. He told me the clause allowed for the appointment of an independent receiver. He told me the receiver would audit the trust's transactions. He told me the receiver would determine what had been properly distributed and what had been misappropriated. He told me the receiver would have the authority to liquidate assets that had been purchased with trust funds. He told me that included the house my aunt was living in. He told me that included the car. He told me that included the renovations she had made to her kitchen. Visual, a legal document on a desk, a highlighted paragraph, the word clause circled in red pen, a paperclip holding a photograph of a house. I asked him why he was calling me. I asked him why me and not my cousin. He said, "You're the oldest. You're the one who was supposed to receive the first distribution. Your aunt should have contacted you when you turned 25. She didn't. She's been filing annual reports with the court. The reports say the distributions were made. They say you received them. They say your cousins received them. No. The reports are not accurate. That's why I said, yeah, but not really. I don't follow subtree. I asked him how he knew the reports were not accurate. He said, "Because you called me. You called me because you didn't remember any distribution. You called me because your aunt had never mentioned the trust. You called me because you were 19 when your parents died, and you signed papers you didn't understand. That made me curious. I checked the filings. I requested the bank records. I found the discrepancies. Now, the mechanism was the trust's audit provision. It was a clause buried in the original document, written in language that would have been boring to anyone who wasn't looking. It said that if a beneficiary requested an accounting, the trustee was required to provide it within 60 days. It said that if the accounting was not provided, the beneficiary could petition the court for a forensic audit. It said that the forensic audit would be conducted at the expense of the trust. It said that if the audit revealed misappropriation, the trustee would be personally liable for the full amount. I had not known about the clause. I had not known about the trust. I had known about my grandfather's house. I had known that he had owned a small hardware store. I had known that he had been careful with his money. I had known that he was the kind of man who saved receipts and kept a ledger in a shoebox. I had not known that he had created a trust. I had not known that he had intended for his grandchildren to go to college. I had known that he had written my name into a legal document when I was 5 years old. I petitioned the court, and he did. I did it through Mr. Okonkwo, Medical. I did it because I had nothing to lose and 17 years to account for. I did it because I was tired of being the person who understood. I did it because I had spent my adult life making do with nothing, and I had just learned that the nothing was a lot. The court appointed a receiver. The receiver was a woman named Mrs. Adigoke. Now, she had been a forensic accountant for 22 years. She had audited trusts before. She had seen this pattern before. She told me that the pattern was common. She said it happened when a family had money and someone decided that the money was there. She said it happened when the beneficiaries were too young to know the difference. She said it happened when the trustee assumed that no one would check. She checked. She checked the bank records. She checked the tax filings. She checked the annual reports. She compared them to the trust's terms. She compared them to the withdrawals. She compared them to my aunt's lifestyle. She found the discrepancies. She quantified them. She wrote a report. The report was 67 pages long. It had a summary at the beginning. The summary said that Marta Vasquez had misappropriated $237,000. And yes, I carved $37,000. That was the number. That was the amount my aunt had taken. That was the amount she had spent on a kitchen, and a car, and a vacation, and a wedding, and a life that was supposed to have been mine. That was the amount that was supposed to have paid for my education. That was the amount that was supposed to have given me a start. That was the amount that was supposed to have kept me from working 3 jobs and living in a studio apartment with a dying radiator. The receiver recommended liquidation. She recommended that the assets purchased with trust funds be sold to recover the misappropriated amount. She recommended that my aunt's house be put on the market. She recommended that the car be surrendered. She recommended that the proceeds be returned to the trust for distribution. She recommended that my aunt be removed as trustee. She recommended that I be appointed as the replacement. I was appointed. I was appointed in a hearing that took place in a courtroom on the 11th floor of the same building where Mr. Okonkwo had his office. The courtroom was small. There was a judge. There was a court reporter. There was my aunt, Lenny. There was my cousin Sophia. There was my cousin Diego. There was a lawyer my aunt had hired. There was Mrs. Attigo. And there was me. Visual, a courtroom. A wooden bench. A judge in a black robe. A table with a stack of papers. A woman in the front row. She is crying. My aunt was crying. She was crying before the hearing started. She was crying when the judge read the findings. She was crying when Mrs. Attigo presented the 67-page report. She was crying when the judge ordered the liquidation of her assets. She was crying when she stood up and pointed at me. "You can't do this," she said. "I am your family. I took care of you. I took care of everything." The judge asked her to sit down. She did not sit down. She kept pointing at me. "I did what I had to do. Your parents left you nothing. I had to manage things. I had to make decisions. You don't understand what it was like." That was the first time she used the phrase in my presence. "You don't understand." She said it like she had said it to me 100 times. She said it like she had said it when I was 19 and she was telling me to sign papers. She said it like she had said it when I asked about the house. She said it like she had said it when I asked about my parents' things. "You don't understand, Elena. You don't understand how things work." I looked at her. I was not crying. I was not angry. I was sitting in a chair in a courtroom. I was wearing a blazer. I was wearing glasses. I was holding a folder. The folder had a copy of the report. It had a copy of the trust document. It had a copy of the clause. "I understand," I said. "I understand that you told me there was nothing. I understand that you signed documents that said I received distributions. I never received. I understand that you spent $237,000 that belonged to me and my cousins. I understand that you filed false reports. I understand that you did this for 17 years. I understand that you used the money to remodel your kitchen while I was working 3 jobs and paying off loans that I didn't need to take out. I understand all of that. I understand it perfectly. No. Nine. Oh. One? Wow. She stopped crying. She stared at me. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked at her lawyer. Her lawyer was not looking at her. Her lawyer was looking at the judge. The judge ruled in favor of the liquidation. The ruling was final. There was no appeal. The house was sold. The car was surrendered. The kitchen renovations were reversed. The proceeds were returned to the trust. The total recovery was $204,000. The remaining $33,000 was considered a loss. My aunt was required to pay it back in installments. She was required to pay it back over a period of 10 years. She was required to pay it back from her salary as a receptionist at a dental office. The trust was distributed. I received my share. It was $134,000. My cousins received their shares. Sophia received hers. She called me to thank me. Diego received his. He did not call. He sent a text. The text said, "Appreciate it." I used the money to pay off the remaining balance on my student loans. I had paid off most of them. I had paid off $41,000. I had $1,000 left. I paid it off. I paid it off with a check from the trust. I wrote the check. I addressed the envelope. Now, I mailed it. I watched the mail truck drive away. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. I felt like I had been running a race that I had not known was a race. I used the rest of the money to buy a small house. The house was not a mansion. It was a 2-bedroom bungalow with a porch and a yard. It had a kitchen with a new refrigerator. It had a radiator that did not make a dying sound. It had a mailbox with my name on it. It was mine. I paid for it with money that should have been mine all along. Visual: a small house, a porch with a wooden railing, a mailbox with the name Vasquez printed on it in black letters, a key in a lock. The liquidation was not the end of the story. The liquidation was the beginning of the consequences. My aunt lost her house. She lost her car. She lost her kitchen. She lost the status she had been building for 17 years. She moved into a small apartment in a part of town that was not her part of town. She worked as a receptionist. She told her friends that she had been wronged. She told her friends that her niece had destroyed the family. She told her friends that I had taken everything. She did not tell them about the trust. She did not tell them about the $237,000. She did not tell them about the false reports. She did not tell them about the 17 years. She told them a story about an ungrateful niece and a legal system that favored the young. She told them a story that made her the victim. My cousin Sophia called me after the liquidation was complete. She was not angry. She was not grateful. She was quiet. She said, "I didn't know about the trust. I didn't know about any of it. I thought my mom was just helping herself because she had to. I thought she was keeping us afloat. I didn't know she was keeping herself afloat. That was the moment I heard something I had not expected. Sophia was not defending her mother. She was not attacking me. She was realizing that her mother had been using her too. She was realizing that the trips to Europe and the private school tuition and the wedding that had been paid for with trust funds were not free. They had been paid for with my inheritance. They had been paid for with her inheritance. They had been paid for with Diego's inheritance. They had been paid for with money that was supposed to have been shared equally. Sophia said, "I don't know what to do with that." I said, "You don't have to do anything. You just have to know." She was quiet for a long time. She said, "You understand?" I said, "I do." I have not spoken to my aunt since the hearing. She called me once. She called me to ask if I could help with the installments. She said the payments were too high. She said the dental office was not paying her enough. No. She said she was struggling. I did not answer the call. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the message. She used the phrase again. She said, "Elena, I know you're angry, but you have to understand. I was just trying to keep things together." That was the second time. You have to understand. It was the same phrase with a slight modification. No. Damihoga. Divasalat. It was the same appeal to my capacity for forgiveness. It was the same assumption that I would be the one who made the effort, who absorbed the cost, who smoothed the edges. It was the same expectation that I would set aside the 17 years, and the $237,000, and the studio apartment, with the dying radiator, and I would say, "Yes, Aunt Marta, I understand. I understand that you were just trying to keep things together. I understand that my inheritance was just a tool you used to build your life. I understand that I was the one who had to pay for it. I did not call her back. I did not help with the installments. I let her struggle. It was not a punishment. It was a boundary. It was the first boundary I had ever drawn with her. It was the first boundary I had drawn with anyone in my family. I have a quiet life now. I have a job I don't hate. I have a house that is mine. I have a garden. I grow tomatoes. I have a phone that rings infrequently. When it rings, I check the number. If it is my aunt, I do not answer. If it is my cousin Sophia, I sometimes answer. If it is my cousin Diego, I let it go to voicemail. He has never called me back. That is fine. Visual, a garden. A tomato plant with green tomatoes. A wooden bench. A cup of tea on the bench. A phone on the bench next to the cup. I sit on my porch. I watch the street. I watch the neighbors walk their dogs. I watch the mail truck drive by. I think about the trust. I think about the clause. I think about the day I opened Mr. Okonkwo's letter and learned that my parents had not left me nothing. I think about the day I walked into the courtroom and watched my aunt's face collapse because she had finally been held accountable. I think about what my mother would have said. Oh, she would have said, "Elena, you have to be the bigger person." She would have said, "Elena, family is everything." She would have said, "Elena, you understand." She would have said all of those things. She would have said them because she had been raised in the same house. She had been raised to believe that understanding was the price you paid for being loved. I do not believe that anymore. I believe that understanding is the price you pay for being used. I believe that being the bigger person is a burden you carry for people who never intend to get smaller. I believe that family is not everything. I believe that sometimes family is the thing that keeps you from everything. I am Elena Vasquez. I am 36. I have a house and a garden and a phone that I am free to ignore. I have a trust that is finally closed. I have a phrase that I have returned to its owner. You have to understand. That was what she said. And I do. I understand that being the one who understands is not a gift. It is a choice. And I choose not to give it away anymore. I understand that now. Ow.